If someone told me a year ago that my perfect life was nothing more than a carefully woven lie, I would have laughed. I would have held on to my husband's hand, looked into his steady blue eyes, and said with the deepest conviction, "We are different. We are stronger than that." But life has a twisted sense of humor. And betrayal, I've learned, never announces itself with sirens or warnings. It slithers in quietly, poisoning everything you once believed in, until you're left choking on your own foolish trust. It all started on the night of our wedding anniversary. I remember the scent of the candles I lit in the kitchen, the warmth of the casserole baking in the oven, and the nervous excitement in my chest as I wrapped the gift I had chosen so carefully for Ryan. A limited edition watch, handcrafted, in Switzerland, engraved with the words, "To forever, my love." But fate, it seemed, had planned a different kind of surprise. While waiting for Ryan to return from an important meeting at Carter Holdings, our family's real estate empire, based in Boston, I mindlessly scrolled through social media, looking for distraction. That was when I stumbled upon the post. My boyfriend was diagnosed with azoospermia. What should I do? It seemed innocent enough. My heart, soft and aching from months of struggling with fertility treatments, immediately reached out across the void to this faceless woman. I understood pain. I understood the desperate longing for a child. I even started typing out a long, heartfelt response, sharing my own journey through injections, bruises, and silent tears, until I saw the comments. "Azoospermia isn't so bad," one user joked. "At least you save money on condoms." The original poster responded, "Should I break up with him?" Another reply came quickly. "Only if he pressures you into painful procedures. Otherwise, no need. Unless..." And then casually, the woman dropped a bombshell so cruel, so horrifying, that it stopped me mid-sentence. "No need to worry," she wrote. "My boyfriend has a hideous old wife. I'm not the one who'll be suffering to have a baby. He would never let me go through that kind of pain." At first I thought I had misread it. I blinked. I reread. It was there. A cold, arrogant declaration that some other woman's life was disposable. That her suffering was a non-issue. That woman, that hideous old wife, was me. Of course, at that moment, I didn't know it. Not yet. I only felt the gut punch of disgust, the visceral recoil from another woman's heartlessness. I watched as the comment section erupted in rage. Strangers condemned her shamelessness. Some tried to argue, others just cursed. But the woman, she didn't falter. Instead, she posted a photo. A photo of herself nestled into the arms of a man whose hand, whose watch, whose very presence made the world beneath my feet tremble. It was Ryan's hand. I zoomed in, heart hammering. The watch on his wrist was identical to the one he wore every day. The gift from our 3rd anniversary. And the place they were in. The rooftop lounge at the Charles Hotel. One we had visited together countless times. Something inside me cracked. Just a hairline fracture, but enough. I could have closed the app. I could have gone to bed and waited for Ryan to come home, drunk on lies. But curiosity, no, desperation, gnawed at my bones. I kept scrolling, and the more I scrolled, the more the pieces began to fall into place. The woman's boasts about her boyfriend's career, vice president of a Boston-based real estate company. The description of his car, a black Porsche gifted by someone close. His condo in Back Bay, our condo. His inability to be with. His old hag wife on special occasions. Tonight, our anniversary. Piece by jagged piece, the puzzle assembled itself into a picture I couldn't deny. Ryan Carter. My husband. My everything. Betraying me in the most despicable way possible. I clutched the phone so hard my knuckles turned white. My vision blurred with hot tears that I refused to let fall. No. Not yet. Not until I was sure. Not until I had proof so irrefutable that even my broken heart would have no choice but to accept the truth. Because somewhere deep inside me, the loyal, foolish Emily still whispered, "Maybe it's just a coincidence. Maybe you're overthinking. Ryan loves you. He chose you." But then, I remembered the pain in his eyes when we discussed IVF. I remembered how he had hesitated, how he had insisted on using his sperm, how strangely relieved he looked when my first attempt failed. And now I understood why. Ryan wasn't planning a future with me. He was using me as a vessel, a surrogate womb to carry someone else's legacy. And worst of all, that legacy was not even his own. Suddenly, the clock on the wall ticked, so loudly it hurt my ears. The casserole in the oven burned to ash. The candles melted into puddles of wax. And the gift, the beautiful watch, lay abandoned on the counter, as useless as the promises Ryan had made to me. I sat there, frozen, for what felt like hours. The night swallowed the world outside. When Ryan finally stumbled in past midnight, reeking of expensive whiskey and guilt, he draped his arms around me and slurred, "Emily, I love you so much." The words, once my comfort, now sliced into me, like knives. I didn't scream, I didn't cry. I simply smiled, the kind of smile that hid a million shattered pieces behind it, and whispered back, "I love you too." Because now, the game had changed. Ryan Carter didn't know it yet. Neither did his little mistress. But I was no longer the naive wife waiting for scraps of love. I was a woman scorned, and my silence was the calm before a storm they could never survive. If you're as stunned as I was when this all began, don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Your support is the fire that keeps these real, raw stories coming. Trust me, you won't want to miss how this one unfolds. Now, let's get your thoughts. Quiz time. Who do you think betrayed Emily first? A. Ryan, by falling for someone else. B. Emily, by trusting too easily. Comment your answer, A or B, below. I'll be reading every single one. The morning after our anniversary passed like a ghost drifting through the house. Ryan left early, claiming urgent meetings that couldn't wait. I stood by the window, coffee cooling in my hand, watching his Porsche shrink down the driveway until it vanished. A part of me wanted to run after him, beg for an explanation, pretend. None of it was real. But the stronger, colder part of me had already begun gathering every weapon I would need. I wasn't just betrayed. I was targeted. That day, I created a new account on the forum where Sophie Miller had posted about her poor, infertile boyfriend. I used a fake name, a blurry profile picture. I followed her account. I watched. I waited. What I found was worse than I ever imagined. Sophie wasn't hiding her relationship. She was flaunting it. Photos of weekend getaways to Nantucket. Candlelit dinners in Beacon Hill restaurants I had once called my favorites. Smirking captions like, "When he's stuck with someone he doesn't love, but sneaks away to find his happiness with me." Each word was another knife. But it wasn't until she posted a photo of a man's hand, intertwined with hers across a marble countertop, that the truth settled in my bones so deeply it would never leave. On his wrist was the limited edition Omega watch I had given Ryan for his promotion to vice president. His ring finger wore the platinum wedding band I had placed there with trembling hands only a year ago. Ryan Carter. My husband. Her lover. The shock wasn't the worst part. The worst part was how meticulously he had woven the lies. He didn't stumble into an affair. He built it. He maintained 2 separate lives with the precision of a surgeon. At home, he was the caring, supportive husband, urging me to be strong through rounds of hormone injections and endless doctor visits. In hotel rooms and private villas, he was the passionate lover, whispering promises of a future to another woman. And Sophie, She wasn't just any fling. She was his high school sweetheart. The girl he claimed he hadn't spoken to in over a decade. Apparently, absence made the heart not only grow fonder, but also ruthless. I spent the next week piecing it all together. I hired a private investigator. Every credit card transaction, every hidden meeting, every overnight stay at luxury hotels billed to the company under client entertainment. It all pointed to one thing. Ryan had never planned to build a family. With me, he was using me. But it wasn't only about the affair. There was something darker, something uglier at the core. One evening, buried deep in Sophie's older posts, I found it, the casual admission that shook me more than all the pictures combined. He says he can't have kids because of some condition. But don't worry, his father's still strong. There's always a solution. I read it again and again, until the words burned themselves into my brain. Ryan Carter was planning to use his own father's sperm to get me pregnant. I felt physically ill. I collapsed on the cold marble floor, retching into my hands. My stomach twisted into knots that no medicine could untangle. It was no longer just betrayal. It was violation. They wanted an heir for the Carter name so desperately that they were willing to deceive me into carrying a child that wasn't even Ryan's. Worse, a child conceived from a lineage so twisted it made my skin crawl. William Carter, a man who once patted my head with fatherly affection, who sat at my dinner table and toasted to family, was now part of this monstrous scheme. I thought of all the injections, all the bruises blooming under my skin, all the nights I cried alone in the bathroom trying to be brave, and it had all been a lie. Rage burned away the last remnants of my grief. I made a decision that night. I would not scream. I would not beg. I would become the storm they never saw coming. First, I canceled my upcoming IVF appointment without telling Ryan. I called the clinic under my maiden name, quietly removed myself from the schedule. No more hormone shots, no more manipulation. Then, I began to build my war chest. I continued pretending at home, smiling, cooking, playing the dutiful wife. I even bought Ryan a new set of cufflinks, engraving his initials with all the sweetness I could muster. Every kiss on the cheek, every good luck at work, was a calculated move. Because when a man believes you are still blind, he lets his guard down. And Ryan, arrogant in his triumph, was already planning his next steps. I overheard him on the phone late one night, murmuring to William, "It's almost done. A few more weeks and she'll be too far in to back out." He meant pregnancy. They wanted me pregnant, trapped, before I could suspect anything. They underestimated me. In the days that followed, I planted seeds in Ryan's mind, softly, like smoke under a door, suggesting that Carter Holdings needed fresh blood, that the company could benefit from young, ambitious talent. Ryan, always eager to look like a visionary leader, lapped it up. When I introduced Sophie Miller, under a fake resume and glowing recommendations, Ryan didn't even blink. He hired her into a high-ranking position, congratulating himself on finding such a brilliant addition to the team. He brought his mistress into the very heart of my world, thinking he was outsmarting me. Perfect. Now they were all under one roof. Easier to control, easier to watch, and when the time came, easier to destroy. The final straw came one afternoon when I received an anonymous email. Attached were images from a hotel security camera in Cape Cod, time-stamped the night of our anniversary. Ryan and Sophie, kissing passionately by the elevators, entering the same suite, never leaving until morning. It was no longer suspicion. It was fact. I printed every photo, every email, every transaction report, every hotel receipt. I placed them neatly into a leather-bound file, and I waited. Because the greatest revenge is not delivered in anger or haste. It is served with precision. Ryan Carter was about to learn the true price of betrayal. Not just the loss of his marriage. Not just the public humiliation. He would lose everything. His title, his wealth, his legacy. And most deliciously, he would watch the empire he thought he inherited crumble into dust, slipping through his fingers while the woman he underestimated rose higher than he could ever dream. But not yet. The storm was still gathering, and when it finally broke, it would drown them all. Revenge, I learned, is not a fire that burns bright and fast. It is a slow, creeping frost that seeps into the cracks, freezing everything it touches until even the strongest structures collapse under its weight. In the weeks that followed, I became a master of patience. Outwardly, nothing changed. Emily. Carter remained the picture of composure, the elegant wife standing proudly beside Ryan at every event, smiling politely at board members, laughing at appropriate jokes. I was the perfect facade. Inside, however, I was sharpening my knives. Sophie. Miller settled into Carter Holdings seamlessly. Ryan paraded her around as a prized find, introducing her to everyone as the company's future. I watched him watch her when he thought no one noticed, the way his gaze lingered just a little too long, the way his smile softened in, a way it never did for me anymore. It was almost laughable how blind they were. They believed they had outwitted me. They believed they were building a future right under my nose. But every step they took only led them closer to the cliff I had laid at their feet. My opportunity came sooner than expected. Carter Holdings decided to host a lavish corporate retreat in New York City, renting out an entire hotel for a weekend of seminars, team-building exercises, and networking opportunities. Ryan, of course, insisted Sophie attend. He even encouraged me to come along, perhaps thinking my presence would further cement the illusion of his innocence. I agreed with a smile. The first night, there was a formal gala. The hotel ballroom glittered with crystal chandeliers and the clink of champagne flutes. Men in tailored suits and women in shimmering gowns mingled, trading pleasantries over foie gras and imported wine. I wore a deep emerald dress, simple, elegant, striking against my pale skin. As I descended the grand staircase, conversations faltered. Heads turned. Even Ryan's jaw tightened slightly when he saw me. For the first time in months, I saw a flicker of uncertainty in his eyes. Good. I circulated among the guests with practiced ease, charming investors, chatting with executives, planting subtle seeds of doubt about the new, rising star Sophie Miller. She's very ambitious. Isn't she? I said casually to a board member. Reminds me a bit too much of those who rise fast and fall faster. I watched the thought take root in his mind. It would grow in the dark, just as I intended. Later that evening, after the speeches and awards, the real party began. Liquor flowed freely. People loosened their ties, kicked off their heels. And Sophie? She drank. Not much at first, but enough. Enough to sway slightly when she laughed. Enough to flush pink when Ryan brushed his hand along her back in what he thought was a discreet gesture. It was all too easy. I had arranged for Sophie's suite to be on the same floor as the Carters. A small clerical error thanks to a hefty tip to the hotel manager. I also ensured that certain substances found their way into her drinks. Nothing dangerous, just enough to lower inhibitions, muddy her judgment. By midnight, Sophie was weaving through the hallway, giggling into her phone. I followed at a distance, my heels silent on the plush carpet. I wasn't the only one watching. William Carter had arrived earlier that evening under the pretense of supporting his son's career. In truth, he was drunk, bitter, and reckless, the perfect storm. I saw it unfold with chilling clarity. Sophie stumbled toward her suite. William, lurking like a vulture, swooped in under the guise of assisting her, an arm around her waist, a whispered assurance. A door closing behind them. I waited precisely 10 minutes. Then I knocked. Loudly. There was a commotion inside. a chair scraping, a muffled curse. Finally, William opened the door, face flushed, shirt askew. Sophie sat on the edge of the bed, confused and frightened. I stepped into the room without invitation, my smile razor sharp. "Everything all right in here?" I asked sweetly. Neither answered. I lifted my phone, flashing the recording app still running. Their faces paled simultaneously. Good. The next morning, chaos erupted. I had sent the footage anonymously to several key figures within Carter Holdings. Whispers turned into roars. By noon, the board demanded an emergency meeting. William tried to bluster his way out, claiming Sophie had come on to him. Sophie, terrified of losing her new life, tried to downplay the incident as a misunderstanding. But it was too late. Human Resources opened a formal investigation. The press caught wind of a scandal involving the prestigious Carter family. Stocks soared. Prices wavered. Investors panicked. Ryan's carefully constructed empire began to tremble at its foundation. And I, the invisible architect of their downfall, merely smiled. But I wasn't finished. The real destruction had to be personal. That evening, under the pretense of clearing the air, I invited Ryan, William, and Sophie to a private dinner at the Yo Hotel's rooftop restaurant. Ryan arrived first, looking strained but determined. William followed, his swagger replaced with sullen resentment. Sophie trailed behind, eyes rimmed red from crying. I greeted them warmly, like a gracious hostess. We sat. The city sparkled beneath us, oblivious to the reckoning unfolding above. For a moment, no one spoke. Finally, Ryan cleared his throat. "Emily, we need to talk about what happened." I raised a hand. "No," I said. "I'll talk. You'll listen." Their faces stiffened, but they obeyed. I laid out every piece of evidence, every photo, every transaction, every conversation I had recorded. I exposed Ryan's affair, William's betrayal, Sophie's complicity, their faces drained of color with each revelation. And then, I dropped the final bomb. I slid an envelope across the table toward Ryan. Inside was the DNA analysis report I had secretly obtained. Proof that Ryan was infertile. Proof that any attempt to impregnate me would have involved William. Proof that their entire scheme was laid bare. Ryan's hands trembled as he read. Sophie gasped, covering her mouth. William swore under his breath. I leaned back, savoring the moment. "You thought you could manipulate me," I said, voice soft but lethal. "You thought you could build your empire on my body, my life, my trust." I stood, gathering my things. "You were wrong." Without another word, I turned and walked away, leaving them sitting there, broken, exposed, powerless. But I wasn't done yet. In the days that followed, I quietly assumed more control over Carter Holdings. Strategic alliances, whispered rumors, sudden resignations, all orchestrated from the shadows. Ryan, desperate to salvage what he could, clung to Sophie, unaware that she was now a liability more than an asset. William faced mounting pressure from both legal authorities and the company. His health, already fragile, began to deteriorate under the strain. And Sophie? She found herself isolated, shunned, whispered about in corridors. The Golden Girl reduced to a cautionary tale. I watched it all unfold with a calmness that surprised even me. The revenge wasn't loud. It wasn't violent. It was silent, precise, complete. They had tried to destroy me. Instead, they destroyed themselves. And I was just getting started dodgy about betrayal. Is that it never ends where the betrayer thinks it will. Ryan Carter, for all his polished smiles and clever deceptions, truly believed he could slip free from the web he had woven. He thought the damage would be minimal, the fallout contained. He thought he could betray, lie, manipulate, and somehow walk away clean. But when a foundation is built on lies, no matter how grand the structure, it always collapses. The day Ryan served me divorce papers was cold, bleak, and strangely still. Snow fell outside the windows of our Boston townhouse, blanketing the city in silence. I had been expecting it. In truth, I had been counting on it. I opened the envelope with steady hands, read the accusations typed neatly across the page. Emotional, cruelty, failure to conceive, irreconcilable differences. I almost laughed. Failure to conceive. He dared to weaponize the pain he had orchestrated, dared to accuse me of a body he himself had betrayed. There was no anger as I folded the papers and placed them aside. Only an overwhelming sense of purpose. Let him believe he had won. Let him think he was seizing the upper hand. The real war was already over. He just hadn't realized he had lost yet. Ryan's lawyers demanded 50% of everything. Half the townhouse, half my shares in Carter Holdings, half the investments meticulously built by my family's blood and sweat over decades. They submitted glossy proposals, peppered with phrases like equitable division and fair settlement. But what they didn't know was that I had been preparing for this moment long before Ryan even laid eyes on Sophie Miller again. The townhouse? Legally owned by my parents through an irrevocable trust. The stocks? Transferred into a holding company, under my mother's name years ago. The investment accounts? Guarded by airtight prenuptial agreements, Ryan had foolishly skimmed over in his eagerness to marry into wealth. All he was entitled to was what was legally considered communal property, which, as it turned out, was not much. A battered Tesla, the Tau, same one that had been damaged in a freak construction accident a month earlier, stood as the lone item on the balance sheet with Ryan's name attached to it. The rest slipped through his fingers like smoke. In court, Ryan's face paled with every passing hour. His lawyer stumbled through objections, growing more desperate as evidence after evidence was presented to show that Ryan Carter had no claim to the empire he thought he could steal. At the final hearing, the judge rendered the verdict swiftly. No alimony, no property settlement, no division of assets. Ryan walked out of that courthouse with a crumpled suit, a hollow expression, and the keys to a wrecked car he couldn't afford to repair. Sophie was waiting for him on the courthouse steps. Or at least, he thought she was. In truth, Sophie Miller was facing her own unraveling. Her fall was quieter, but no less brutal. After the scandal with William Carter exploded in the media, her reputation was shredded beyond repair. No reputable company would hire her. No influential circle would welcome her. She had become a pariah, a cautionary tale, whispered about over wine glasses and networking events. To make matters worse, Sophie discovered she was pregnant. At first, she saw it as a victory. She paraded the news like a trophy, flaunting the growing bump as proof that she had secured her place. But even triumphs built on deceit crumble eventually. When Sophie gave birth, the truth could no longer hide in the shadows. The baby's blood type did not match Ryan's, nor William's. It didn't match anyone in the Carter family. An anonymous tip to the hospital triggered a mandatory DNA test. The results were devastating. The child was not Ryan's, not William's, not anyone remotely connected to the Carters. Sophie had been sleeping with someone else, likely another one of her many backup plans. Ryan's rage was volcanic. He screamed at her in the hospital, accusations pouring from his mouth like venom. Sophie, exhausted and broken, screamed back. Security intervened. Nurses ushered the newborn to safety. The news spread like wildfire. Boston's elite devoured every sordid detail. What remained of Ryan's dignity was incinerated in the public eye. Bank accounts frozen. Credit lines closed. Business contacts disappeared overnight. He was left holding a child that was never his, burdened by debts he couldn't pay, abandoned by a woman who had seen him merely as a stepping stone. Meanwhile, William Carter, already teetering on the edge of ruin, collapsed under the strain. Diagnosed with late-stage cancer, he faced his final days alone, his name a hushed scandal in the circles that once revered him. Even as he rotted away in a hospital bed, he refused to acknowledge his role in the downfall of his family. Some men would rather die clinging to lies than live facing the truth. Ryan tried to rebuild. He applied for jobs, clinging to the tattered remnants of his once golden resume. But Carter Holdings had moved on without him. Under new leadership I had quietly ensured would be loyal to me, the company thrived, untethered from its tainted past. Everywhere Ryan went, doors slammed in his face. In desperation, he turned to Sophie, begging her to come back, to help him raise the child. But Sophie, ever the survivor, had already fled to Los Angeles, chasing new dreams, new men, new schemes. She left Ryan with nothing but court orders demanding child support for a child that wasn't his. It was almost pitiful. Almost. The final blow came one winter morning when Ryan failed to pick up the baby from daycare. Neglect charges were filed. Investigations opened. The last vestiges of his freedom crumbled as he was led away in handcuffs, his name appearing in bold headlines once more. This time not as a rising star of Boston society, but as a cautionary tale of greed, betrayal, and spectacular self-destruction. I watched it all unfold from afar. I never once gloated. I never once reached out. Revenge wasn't about theatrics for me. It was about balance, justice, closure. When I looked in the mirror now, I didn't see the broken woman who once clutched at hope like a lifeline. I saw someone stronger, sharper, forged in the fire of betrayal and reborn from the ashes. I thought about everything I had lost. Trust, innocence, the simple faith that love would be enough. But I also thought about everything I had gained. Freedom, clarity, power, the ability to write my own future, unshackled from the lies of others. Some scars never fade. Some wounds never truly heal. But scars are not weaknesses. They are reminders. Reminders that I survived. Reminders that I endured. Reminders that when the storms came and the walls fell, I did not crumble. I stood, and I would never fall again. When the dust finally settled, there was an eerie kind of silence that followed. The kind of silence that fills a house once laughter has been emptied from its walls. I could still hear echoes of what had once been, memories lingering like old perfume, fading but stubborn. For the first time in years, I was truly alone, and it terrified me. The months after Ryan's fall were not the triumphant parade some would have expected. There was no victory dance, no sparkling celebrations. It was quieter than that, more solemn. It was standing in the wreckage of a life I had once fought to preserve and realizing I had to rebuild it, piece by jagged piece, by myself. I spent the first few weeks avoiding everything familiar. I traveled, first small day trips around Massachusetts, then longer weekends up to Vermont, down to Cape Cod. I needed distance. I needed to remember who Emily Carter was before she became Emily Carter, who lost everything. Slowly, painfully, I stitched myself back together. I found comfort in the little things, in sunrises over rocky shores, in steaming cups of coffee at diners where no one knew my name, in books devoured by firelight, in the feel of cold air filling my lungs as I hiked through the White Mountains, reminding myself I was still alive, still breathing. Grief, I discovered, isn't only for the death of people. It's for the death of dreams, too. The death of innocence. The death of the person you once were. And yet, even as I grieved, something else was growing inside me. Something fiercer. Freedom. For the first time, I was no longer living for someone else. No longer bending myself into shapes that pleased a man or soothed a family name. My life was finally mine to define. It wasn't easy. God, it wasn't easy. There were nights when loneliness clawed at my ribs like a wild animal. Nights when anger surged up so violently it felt like drowning. Nights when I lay awake wondering if somehow, despite everything, I had failed. But morning always came, and each time it did, the light felt a little less sharp, a little more like hope. Boston, too, began to feel different. Less like a battlefield, more like a canvas. I returned to Carter Holdings not as a scorned woman, not as the abandoned wife, but as a force, quiet, composed, utterly unshakable. The board that had once whispered doubts now looked to me with something approaching reverence. Emily Carter wasn't just a survivor. She was a woman reborn. The company thrived under my leadership. We expanded into markets Ryan had deemed too risky, invested in green technologies, partnered with organizations that valued integrity over profit. Within a year, Carter Holdings wasn't just surviving the scandal. It was flourishing, setting new records, earning accolades from every corner of the industry, and I finally understood that the best revenge was never destruction. It was rebuilding something so magnificent that the people who tried to break you are forced to watch, powerless, irrelevant, as you soar. Of Ryan Carter, I heard little and cared even less. Rumors said he moved to a rundown apartment outside of Worcester, trying to scrape together some semblance of a life while battling court-ordered child support payments and the remnants of public disgrace. As for Sophie Miller, her name occasionally surfaced in gossip columns, attached to a string of failed business ventures and scandalous affairs. She had become exactly what she had always been beneath the pretty surface, a cautionary tale, a punchline. But their fates were no longer my concern. I had let them go, not out of forgiveness, but out of sheer disinterest. I refused to tether myself to the wreckage of people who had never deserved my loyalty in the first place. Instead, I focused forward. I launched a foundation dedicated to supporting women recovering from betrayal and domestic manipulation. I poured my pain into purpose, creating scholarships, mentorship programs, safe spaces. Watching other women rise from their own ashes made every sleepless night, every tear-stained pillow, every moment of despair feel somehow worth it. Through them, I healed. Through them, I found meaning. One evening, nearly 2 years after Ryan's betrayal first came to light, I stood alone at a charity gala hosted by my foundation. The grand ballroom was bathed in soft, golden light. Laughter and music floated through the air. On the stage, a young woman, one of our first scholarship recipients, was telling her story. Her voice shook at first, but grew stronger with each word, each truth spoken aloud. As I listened, I felt a lump rise in my throat, because in her, I saw myself, not the broken girl who once curled up on cold bathroom tiles, begging the universe for answers, but the woman who rose anyway. When the applause thundered through the room, I closed my eyes for a moment and allowed myself to feel it all. The grief, the triumph, the raw, bloody reality of what it meant to rebuild your life from nothing. I didn't need a partner to complete me. I didn't need revenge to validate me. I was enough. I had always been enough. I just needed to remember it. Later that night, as I slipped away from the crowds and wandered out onto the balcony overlooking the city, I realized I wasn't just standing atop the world. I was standing atop the ruins of the life that had tried to cage me, and I had turned them into a throne. The stars stretched wide above Boston. The cool breeze kissed my cheeks. And for the first time in what felt like a lifetime, I smiled. Not the brittle, practiced smile I had worn like armor during the dark days, but a real one. Genuine. Free. Emily Carter had died the day Ryan Carter betrayed her. But the woman who stood here now, she was something entirely different. She was stronger, sharper, unbreakable. And as the city lights shimmered below me, I whispered a promise into the night. Not to Ryan, not to the ghosts of betrayal past, but to myself. No one would ever steal my light again. No one would ever dim my fire. I was not a victim. I was not a survivor. I was a force, and my story, it was only just beginning. After everything Emily Carter endured, the betrayals, the lies, the unimaginable cruelty, she emerged not as a shattered woman, but as a force that refused to be broken. Her story was never just about infidelity or the downfall of a husband who mistook greed for power. It was about the silent strength that builds inside a person when the world expects them to collapse. Emily's journey began with love, trust, and a belief in the life she was building with Ryan Carter. She gave herself fully to her marriage, nurturing hopes of a future filled with family, loyalty, and shared dreams. But when betrayal came, not just from Ryan, but from the very foundation she had built her life upon, she didn't let it define her. Instead, she took every shattered piece and used it to create something stronger, something far more resilient. Through pain, she found clarity. Through devastation, she found purpose. She didn't allow anger or vengeance to consume her. She channeled those emotions into careful, calculated actions. And when she had the chance to destroy those who had wronged her completely, she chose, instead, to rebuild herself. That is the true power of Emily's story. Revenge was never the end goal. Reclaiming her own life was. By the time Ryan's life fell apart, by the time Sophie's lies caught up with her, by the time William Carter faced the crumbling of his legacy, Emily was already rising above them all. She was not sitting in the rubble, weeping for what was lost. She was standing on the highest ground, having built herself anew, stronger and wiser than ever before. Her story teaches us that the greatest revenge is not in retaliation, but in reinvention. It's not enough to punish those who harm us. True healing comes when we grow so far beyond their reach that they become irrelevant. Emily's decision to invest in herself, to focus on helping others who had been through betrayal, to transform her pain into strength, this is the core of her triumph. She didn't just survive, she thrived. And she did it on her own terms. The lesson we can all draw from Emily's journey is simple, yet profound. Pain does not define you. Betrayal does not destroy you. What you choose to do with that pain, how you choose to rise from that betrayal, that is what shapes your true story. In our lives, betrayal can come from anywhere, not just romantic partners, but friends, family members, business associates. When it does, it's tempting to lash out, to demand vengeance. But Emily's story shows us a different path. To pause, to breathe, to rebuild with patience and wisdom. Instead of reacting impulsively, she moved strategically. Instead of being driven by hate, she was fueled by a vision of a better future for herself. And that's a lesson we can all apply to our own lives. When someone betrays you, remember, the most powerful thing you can do is not to hurt them back. It's to live so fully, so freely, that they no longer have any power over you. Your success, your peace, your joy. Those are the victories that no one can steal from you. So when betrayal knocks you down, get back up. But don't just return to who you were. Become someone even stronger, even wiser, even more unstoppable. You owe it to yourself, not to them. You owe it to the life you still have ahead of you. And like Emily Carter, you owe it to the future you are capable of building with your own 2 hands. Now, let's see how well you connected with Emily's journey. Quiz time. If you were in Emily's position, what would you focus on first? A. Planning revenge carefully and patiently. B. Healing yourself. and building a new life. Comment. Your answer A or B below. I'll be reading your answers carefully. Also, what do you personally think about Emily's decision to rebuild herself instead of spending her life seeking revenge? Do you agree with her choice, or would you have handled it differently? Drop your thoughts in the comments section. Let's share and learn from each other. And if you enjoyed this story and want more powerful, emotional journeys like Emily's, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Your support gives us the motivation to create even more inspiring content. Thank you for being here. This is only the beginning.